And we're live.
Hi, welcome to the first round of the Penang Debate Championship. My name is Dave, and I'll be your chair for this round. On the motion, this House will punish schools that disproportionately expel minority students. I invite the Prime Minister to open the case in that government. You know the timing of House Speaker? Yeah.
So the opening government stand for today's debate is that schools should be punished for disproportionately expelling minority students because it is to prevent further repercussion in society. By this, I would like to draw the House's attention that these people we are talking about today are students who are generally believed and known as the leaders of tomorrow. First off, I would like to define certain elements that are important in this debate. First, the definition of punish would be based off law. Punishments that are akin to the school's wrongdoing of disproportionately imposing expulsion towards minority students. It is not an irrational act, for there's no way to go against the law. You cannot go against the law. In this debate, we define minority students as poor, disabled, or restricted from certain privileges, or even in certain countries, people or students who are discriminated by race and background. So first off, if you look at this debate in the light of the majority of the students, it is basically not right for these schools to be granted the freedom of disproportionately expelling minority students because it just simply does not make sense. It can be seen as an unjust act because, for example, if I give an example, what if student A, please hold on, what if student A, who is considered as the major part of the student, they're not accepted here. It's the major part of the student community. What if they are seen performing an unjust act? For instance, like rebelling against a corridor or something. They do not feel compelled to, or they do not have fear. Yes.
Can you give me an example of how you're going to punish the schools, i.e., taking away the funding, or how we see fit?
Like you said, taking away the funding, you just gave me an excellent point actually. You can take away their funding, or you can even like construct how our Ministry of the Education, they do have these huge, what do you call it? Huge, like not hearings, but they have like symphoniums, something like that, where you actually point on these mistakes that the school is making, because not all schools are perfect. You cannot admit that. Every school has its flaw, and this is one of the major flaws that school has. Therefore, the government should look into this, and schools should be punished. Which also brings me to my next point, that people might be asking, why should we punish the schools? Why not the students who do this, or you know? Why should we punish the schools? Which is my first point, because they are the center of school of control. If you do not implement punishment, they will just keep doing it, as in regular human nature. Everyone has heard about the fact that if a child is seen in a negative light or does a mistake, it reflects his or her parent, which can be seen the same way in this debate. Therefore, I believe that this anecdote proves that the school authorities who embody schools themselves should be punished to further avoid damage with society, as our stand says. The start of the problem that the root of the problem should be always tackled in order to actually ensure that society produces better leaders in the future. So by disproportionately expelling minority students, as I was giving the example just now, student A, he has everything, he's normal, he is privileged, he has all the welfare given, everything. And student B perhaps comes from a poorer background or is discriminated against race or religion. If you see student A, he who is normal and has all the privileges and rights, just say he conducts an act of rebellion, he does not feel pressured or afraid of the authorities to impose any punishments upon him, because he knows that he's in the more privileged side of the group, and therefore he has no fear at all. However, is it fair that student B, who is put under circumstances which they have no control over at all, perhaps being disabled from a young age or coming from a poor background, it feels fear that the school should punish him just because of his background which he has no control over. Just because he is just because he has conducted perhaps he has been misjudged as well due to his poor background. We may never know, because people discriminate according to backgrounds, as we mainly see. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. To start the case from side opposition, I'd like to invite the leader from what is it called? Sleep review.
Every school wants to put their best foot forward, so they will obviously want their students to do the best. When a school expels a student, it isn't because of petty issues such as them not having a disability, such as them coming from a poor background. They expel them because they commit acts which are unforgivable. What are those acts? Something like, I don't know, graffiti on the wall, something like stealing phones or stealing other students' property. The students who get expelled aren't the ones who did nothing wrong but somehow got expelled. The students who are expelled are the ones who have committed something wrong, who deserve the punishment, and it just so happens that they come from minority groups in the first place. So a few rebuttals towards side government. They try to tell us that, oh, somehow students come out and try to do an act of rebellion, therefore we should keep them in school. I don't know about you, but how is keeping a student who obviously doesn't care about the rules, who obviously want to rebel against the school, be kept in the school in the first place? Because what is the use of keeping them in the school? What are you telling them when you allow the student to continuously do these acts, breaking the rules, and having no repercussions to that? Because now you're basically telling the student that, oh, no matter how bad your mistake, no matter how bad you break the rules, we're still going to keep you in school because, hey, you're somehow from minority groups. So, which brings me perfectly to what side opposition will bring you. Side opposition will basically bring you the argument on segregation. Three different levels to this. No, thank you, sir. The first on the school administration, the second on the parents and how they will view these schools, and the third on the students themselves. So on the first level on the school administration, what message are you sending the school administration and the school body when you're telling them that if you accept minority students and they so happen to be bad, and even if they're so bad that you actually need to expel them, we're going to cut your funding. We're going to punish you even though it's not your fault for producing this student in the first place. I'm going to tell you what happens. Let me talk about the first level on schools who genuinely want to help. There are schools out there who genuinely want to help minority groups who can't get into school, who actually are from bad backgrounds, who are from poor backgrounds. But then you tell them that, oh, if you so happen to accept a bad student, we're still going to punish you regardless of what you did. So you're basically forcing them to think and assess the risk. Will they actually accept the risk of accepting this student and risking their funding being cut? Because these schools actually rely heavily on the funding from the government to be able to provide the best education possible. So these schools, you're actually forcing them to not even being able to accept these students in the first place, because now they won't be able to control the environment and to control the type of students which even comes in. So then they'll just mitigate the risk completely and not accept students in the first place. Now before I move on, closing.
Do you agree that expelling someone is the highest degree of punishment in schools?
Pardon?
Do you agree that expelling someone is the highest degree of punishment in schools?
To a certain extent, yes, because you actually tell them that, oh, what you did is wrong, you need to reassess what you're actually doing wrong, and you actually need to stop doing and rebelling against the system. Look, if your issue is minority groups disproportionately rebelling out, then have juvenile programs and have them change their attitude and change how they behave in society. If you really want to help minority groups, it isn't really helping them when you're literally segregating them from schools and forcing schools not even accept them in the first place. Moving on, what happens with the bigoted schools then? The schools which really do not want to actually accept these minority groups. Well, they're going to be even more vindicated and come into society and tell everyone that, look, we told you so. These minority groups are the ones who are actually hurting us, are the ones hurting our funding, are the ones hurting the quality of education we can actually give people. So now you allow them to give the argument to tell the people that all the problems that we face in society is because of these minority groups. It's because they are the ones who are harming our society, which moves me perfectly to my second level on parents. Why is it that now parents will actually treat these minority groups with even more prejudices, will actually segregate themselves from these minority groups even more? Because let me illustrate to you, what is it like to be in a community? Let's say your community has only one school, and you trust that that community school will provide the best amount of education that they can towards the child. So then what are you telling the parents then when you're telling them that basically, oh, because of few people, now our school won't be able to provide the best education we can to your child, we're not able to teach your child properly, and we're not able to allow the child to be able to develop to the maximum potential possible to actually prepare them to come out into society. No, thank you, sir. Now these parents will actually be even more reluctant to treat these minority groups even better, because now they'll think, oh, the reason why my child isn't able to get into a good school, isn't able to actually get the best education possible, is because of these minority groups. It's because these are the ones harming my child's prospects to come into society, to come into a good job. Which brings me to my third level, on the students themselves. How is it, let me ask you this question, how is it fair for a group of students to be punished for the actions of others? Remember this, when you're punishing the schools by taking away their funding, you're not just punishing the schools themselves, you're punishing the other students who genuinely want to help the minority groups, who genuinely want to learn. So then you're literally punishing them for something they didn't even do. The ones who really want to actually learn, the ones who really want to have a bright future, how is it fair for us to tell them that, look, because this person actually broke the rule, because this person actually got expelled from school, we're not going to be able to provide new teachers, we're not going to be able to provide a better quality environment for your child. No, thank you, all of you. Because let's remember this, taking away funding isn't as simple as, oh, the school won't be able to get new light bulbs. The school won't be able to hire new teachers. They won't be able to build a new lab. They won't be able to build a new hall, for example. These are the situations and the environments which these students have to go through. Imagine what can be accomplished if the school had the funding, if the school actually had been able to teach these students properly. Which brings me on, no thank you sir, it's already after 6, which brings me to how these students will actually treat minority groups even worse. Because the environment within the school, and everyone knows that because of these minority groups are not able to learn properly, they will treat the minority groups even worse. They will constantly bully them. They'll constantly go into school and tell them that it's your fault. It's your fault that my teacher got fired. It's your fault that I'm not able to I actually cannot even have a new lab. It's your fault why I can't even go to school without going to school normally, simply because you are the ones who caused this problem in the first place. So let me ask you this, if your goal is really to desegregate people, is to really create a community, how are you now creating a proper environment for these students to be able to learn when you're further segregating them in the first place? Both of our sides stand to be able to integrate these minority groups into society, to be able to treat these minority groups fairly. But when you're showing society that the root cause of the problem isn't because your child is not studying properly, but it is because of these minority groups getting these schools from being able to get funding, I don't know about you, but I'll be pretty angry at the minority groups. Both sides stand to help minority groups, but we do not think that cutting funding from schools, that punishing schools simply because of a few students' acts is the way to go.
Thank you, leader of oppositions. We will continue the case from the side of government, Deputy Prime Minister.
Team government stand for today is schools should be punished to prevent further repercussion to society. Before I proceed with my arguments, I would like to rebut the arguments brought up by the opposition leader. First of all, team government isn't saying that schools should not punish students of the minority group. We are just saying that they should be treated equally. Sure, if a school is going to expel a student who's privileged for committing a negative act, then yeah, go ahead, do that to the minority as well. But if ladies and gentlemen, if two students, one who is privileged and one who is not, commit the same act and one gets punished whereas one gets punished lightly whereas the others has to get expelled, is that fair? Of course it's not. That's what team government stands for today. Which is why we think that these schools have to pay and have to be punished without a doubt. We also need to take into consideration that these students from minority groups are put under circumstances that are uncontrollable. So naturally, these students are sometimes going to do bad things, right? These kids of minorities, they are children of single parents. Parents who have to work double shifts, parents who barely see their kids because they're trying so hard to just put a roof over their head and food on their plates. Do you really think that these parents who are so busy trying to survive have the time to sit their kids down and tell them, oh, you know, it's wrong to do this and it's wrong to do that? Of course not. This is why the school should have to take responsibility and they have to tell these kids that this is wrong. That's what counselors are for. That's what teachers have to do. Teachers have to take the responsibility that parents cannot. Now on to my argument, which is why should a student have to pay for a small mistake with expulsion just because of their backgrounds? Now, if a student is born into a poor family or an unprivileged family, they cannot control it. These are circumstances that go against them, ladies and gentlemen. So how is it fair that they have to bear such big consequences of small mistakes that everyone in school may do? Why is it that if I'm poor, I have to get expelled, whereas if that rich guy does the same thing I did, he doesn't get expelled? Ladies and gentlemen, it's clearly unfair. Sure, everyone has to pay for their mistakes and everyone has to know and bear the consequences of their actions. But why does someone who is not privileged have to face heavier punishment than someone who is? Ladies and gentlemen, team government. Sorry, you left it. Accepted. Yeah.
Okay, so the teachers are the one that give out these punishments. Therefore, why do the rest of the students have to suffer when the school's funds are cut? And why do the rest of the students have to suffer for what one racist teacher did?
Yeah.
No, I said that teachers have to take care of their students. Teachers have to make sure that their students who are in the minority, they have to take the responsibility of a parent that a parent cannot really do. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what team government is trying to say. Before I take my seat, I would like to reaffirm our stand, which is schools should be punished to prevent further repercussion to society. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Close the opening of this debate. Let's have the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Yeah.
We see in today's debate that side government is trying to propose a problem-solution mismatch. We see that they don't have the full picture of what today's status quo is, and we as side opposition would like to enlighten them and allow the debate to be more fruitful. So firstly, a few rebuttals towards side government. They talked about things like how if two students get different treatments for the same behavior, how that's not fair. Of course that is not fair, but why do you have to punish the whole school when you cut their funding? Ma'am, Mr. Speaker, who is the one that's doling out these punishments? These are the teachers. And if you have an internally bigoted teacher, then why should the rest of the school pay for that bigoted teacher's actions when their fundings are cut, when they are unable to have new laboratories, when they are unable to get better equipment? Why should the rest of the students pay? Because on their side, remember, on their side, they punish the schools by cutting funds. They punish the schools by taking away government subsidies. Therefore, this is the consequence. This is the consequence of your actions. We see on our side that if we really have such a racist teacher or such a bigoted teacher or such like an unfair teacher, that then you should suspend the teacher or like deal with the teacher. You don't deal with the school as a whole, because the school as a whole hasn't done anything wrong. You see that if that one teacher did something wrong by being extremely bigoted, then you deal with the teacher. You don't make everyone else suffer for what the teacher did. Also, on the second rebuttal, on her point, the school should take responsibility for the students' moral compass. I'll take you guys after my rebuttals. So why, like, they say that the parents are busy, therefore the school should step into the parents' shoes of ensuring that these students have a moral compass. Why? The school, you shouldn't add another burden to a school simply because the reason you have schools is to educate your students, right? It's not to teach these students teach these students and get these students moral compass and like teach them the meaning of life and everything. Like, we do have moral lessons, but like we don't think it's fair to place the burden on one teacher to make sure that every single one of her 40 students behave well at all times. We think that it's a very unfair burden to put on the teacher. So now moving on to my substantives. The first substantive being that how the minority race students being expelled is a symptom and not the root of the problem. Let's take a closer look. My first speaker mentioned this, but let's just take a closer look at what status quo is currently. So basically, we see that even if these a lot of these minority students, like the poorer students or like the students of the minority race, even when they get expelled, why do they get expelled? Surely not all schools are inherently bigoted and not all schools are inherently racist. But we also see that the reason for this is because many of these students who come from minority races, these students who come from a poorer background have a higher likelihood of, let's say, living in ghettos, having bad influences, getting influences from drugs, or even being forced into child labor since their parents can no longer support them, as stated by side-opening government. These students, therefore, are more likely to be in to like care less about education and care less about education, resulting in their expulsion from school. We see that these are articulated. We see that these students, because they have so many other burdens on them, because they come from poorer backgrounds, because they have been discriminated, we think that these students getting expelled is a symptom of the wealth gap. It's a symptom of the flaws in our state rather than the root of the problem. We don't think that if you punish all schools that expel a bigger number of black kids rather than white kids, we don't think that it will solve the problem. But before that, yes.
Do you agree that when minorities are expelled, the fact that they are less likely going to be able to enter other schools in status quo exists?
Well, yeah, like assuming you have been expelled from a school, let's say you come from a very poor background, your parents might just say, okay, come help with the family business and bring food in, right? But like, and that is what happens to a lot of families. But like, let's say that you are talking about these people, they might not find it will be harder for them to find education, but we think that is fine, right? Because that is what you have to pay for if you do something atrocious in school. Like my first speaker said, obviously you have not been listening to my first speaker because he talked about this. We think that the discrimination within schools is something that is moving on from its PY. We think that the discrimination with schools is because of what is happening in society. We think that the government should try and solve society first. We think that by tackling the symptom of this problem, you don't actually solve it, you just aggravate it. Mainly because if you try and solve the problem at a school, you have two results. The first result is that the open-minded people will start to doubt that will start to think that the minorities really are a trouble, really are something there is trouble, because they now are facing the problems that come that have arisen because of this new motion, right? And then secondly, the people that are bigoted, the bigoted response will be like what my first speaker told you, which is like we told you so, right? Like their response will be like, see, minorities are a trouble, minorities are really horrible. So we think that if this is the case and you are trying to solve the problem, how is this trying to solve the problem? All you do is aggravate it, because you don't realize that the root of your problem is far more complex than what you see. We see that the symptom of the wealth gap, the symptom of racism in society is that you get more students, more minority students get expelled. Thus, that is the symptom, the root of the problem. We should be tackling the root of the problem, and so that is why we think that this motion shouldn't be passed, because it not only tackles just the symptom, it also aggravates it. But a quick comparison on what has happened in today's debate. On their side, assuming that everything really happens so wonderfully, and let's say everything really happens so well that there'll be no more discrimination, which is extremely unlikely. Although there'll be no discrimination within the schools, there'll be discrimination within society, and we think that unless this inherent discrimination is taken care of, you will not be able to solve anything within the schools. And with that, I'm very proud to oppose.
Thank you, the leader of opposition, to open debate or opposing sides. Let's have the government.
All of us need to concede that the minority race is a race that we need to help, regardless of any circumstances. But unfortunately, that's not how status quo works. Before I move on to a few points of rebuttal and my positive material, let's go on to actually characterize what is status quo. We agree from the side of opposing our government that status quo in all of the world, basically, if the minority, or not even minority, a majority race commits things that are already unjustified in the first place, we would still oppress them. So regardless if you're an African American or if you are a white person, if you rape somebody and if you actually harm another individual, then we would still take you out of school then. But what is the real problem in status quo? The real problem is that schools are discriminative. Some schools would like to take into account that African Americans or disabled individuals are already individuals who are normalized to do these things that are bad. So rather than find another way to help them rehabilitate and make them better before expelling them, they will go to the last resort and throw them out of school. This is how the discriminative system works. 3 points of rebuttal. First one, how the deputy leader of opposition talked about how you can't blame the teacher and you only blame schools. You must blame the teacher and how you can't blame schools by the end of the day. 2 reasons why we think it's better to blame schools. Firstly, the school controls the teachers as a whole. So if you want to somehow aim for the teachers, more teachers can come into the schools even more. And what happens when you even target schools specifically? Schools will now be aware that any teacher who is discriminative or who are naturally given the right to discriminate a minority student, then we would assure you that these schools are never again going to take up these teachers as a whole. But more than that, what if the school itself is discriminative? Like schools in the United States of America are generally known to not like African Americans, are trying their best to treat African Americans horribly. So these schools are schools that we do not want to be we want to punish. But suddenly, the Prime Minister comes, leader of opposition comes up and talk about how you need to be fair because schools are somehow going to be harmed also in the first place, because now people will look at schools as a system which discriminates and only throws away minority students as a whole. That is the reason why we need to balance things out. The fact that minorities are already being oppressed and have already been thrown out of school for many reasons already is the point in which we want to stop more minorities that aren't somehow justified to get out of school without any way of trying to find out whether or not they're actually guilty and get out and live a life without education. The second point of rebuttal that I have for leader of opposition was that minorities are also going to be harmed, because when they go out, parents are going to be reluctant in leaving them, and the state and the whole community are going to oppress them even more, because now they are the individuals who take the blame, who do not take the blame, but the majority race gets the blame. Firstly, this is not true. The fact that discrimination already happens in our status quo is the point in which people tend to discriminate and have stigmas towards minority races even more. So even if you didn't do quite a harm compared to that white person, you will still be more like discriminated at a higher level. But even if what leader of opposition said was true, let's make a comparative. On the their side, people hate them, and people also do not like them, and parents are reluctant in going to believe in them, but they do not have education. On the outside, we still have parents hating them, we still have the society hating them, but to the very least, they can still be in school and learn and become successful by the end of the day. Your side loses hope for education. First argument, how you are principally active, and it's principally unfair for you to have this policy. Before we move on, yes.
Not expelling a student doesn't guarantee good treatment towards the student. How are you guaranteeing that these discriminated students will actually get a good education and not just get ignored by teachers?
Thank you. The point in which both sides have bad treatment towards students, but our side can guarantee and make sure that students get the education that they have, compared to them being at home, not learning anything. That is the trade-off we want to take. First argument, how it's principally unfair. Understanding that there's a difference of lifestyle between minorities and the majority race. How, for example, white individuals are usually privileged and can live a happy life, while on the other hand, African Americans have given a horrible life, they don't live well, and they are always pressured to be better. What happens then, and what is the world that we live in? These minorities are pressured to join negative groups or things that are already like naturally negative in our life. For instance, robbing or that or raping. These things are what they are forced and cornered to go into, because they are naturally the race and labeled as the race. We cannot go on further. Therefore, you should rob even more people. So this stigmas and the pressure that they have is already enough for them to go into schools. But unfortunately, side of opening opposition wants to corner them outside of schools even more. But what happens? Let's move on to my second analysis. How they will never change. Assuming you want to make an individual or a minority that is already bad enough and want to make him a better person, side of opening opposition would not be able to. Why? Because their side would only take these individuals as a whole and through them, regardless if their intention towards that certain crime was good or bad. So even if you didn't want to do it, or you didn't have the actual intention to do it, we'd still throw you off. Because under their side, the logic is, if you committed something wrong without having a proper background behind you, you are still the one guilty to be taken hold of. Second point of argument, how you harm the minorities as a group. So education is really important in the world. You can learn well, you can get a good job, things like that. But somehow, when you expel, even the leader of opposition clarified and agreed that expelling is the highest degree of punishment. It is really hard for minorities to get into their jobs back when these schools are already bigoted and where they are naturally incentivized to show their worst side towards minorities. These minorities won't stand a chance towards these schools. But what happens even more after these teachers already treat them bad? There is a really huge collective harm under our side, because now less individuals will learn and less minorities will tend out to become successful, because all this school does is label them as a minority that commits crime and throw them away, rather than giving them a chance to become a better person and learn and have a good life. So now society will never stop their vicious cycle, because what they want to, what status quo, what all the states wanting to change is that they want to prove that African Americans or minorities can succeed. They can stop committing less crime, or they can be better groups of minorities. But unfortunately, their side only perpetuates that harm. They never allow people to go into a better state of mind. They never allow them to integrate.
Thank you, member of parliament. Now we have a member of opposition. Behind this member.
Hello everybody. Well, I want to start up with first saying that you as being a kid in school, school, the most important thing for you is to be accepted. They need to be accepted among other people. Because if we taught kids how to be themselves, then we won't need therapists or prison cells. We won't need to have to worry about them. But the need to be accepted is where it all starts, because kids that lack sincerity, kids will tell you things the way it is. I don't like it because you're different. I don't like it because you're poor. Kids don't have sincerity. Kids are kids. You can't blame them for any stupid actions, these kind of stupid actions. So really, do you want your kid to grow up in a place that he will feel different from everyone? That will make him feel the racism since he's a kid. He will feel like the community rejecting him because of who he is. Since he's a kid, this will be a major thing in his mind. And another thing that this can cause him to be antisocial. If I'm not accepted in this community, of course I'll be alone. I'll be away from everyone. I won't be social. I won't socialize with everyone. I would lack that ability. All right. And another point that the government forgot to mention, that racism is a two-sided weapon. You can claim, you can do bad stuff and claim that whatever result that happened to you because of racism, or you can be good and racism still happen to you. See, if you like expel students because if you punish schools because minority do bad stuff, then this minority will have privileges. This minority will start at some point will have more freedom than the majority, will have more power, because if you expel them, the school will get punished. So the school won't dare to do that. No, you'll be seated. Okay? So racism is a two-sided weapon. All right? And another thing that this can cause jealousy among kids. All right, let me tell you guys this. I'm a minority in this country, and I've been in school that I've been the only like black guy in the whole class. So how I was treated, and this was university. It wasn't even school. Like school kids will be worse, I'm sure of this. But university people should be adults. People should be able to think. So in that school, and the school is like in that calendar, jealous next time. So what happened in that school that I was always been the guy at the back, no one willing to talk to, no one willing to share anything with you, no one is willing to help you with assignments, no one willing to offer you any kind of help. So any kind of thing you need to do, you have to do it yourself. So seriously, think about it. Do you want to put your kid in such a school that segregate, like even if it's not segregation among yeah, go ahead.
You say that why schools should put these minorities in such schools, right? Which is why schools should not expel these minorities disproportionately.
Because if they accept them, like they said, they will take the risk of if they do anything bad, if they do any stupid thing, and they expel them, the school will be punished. So think about it. If you punish in schools, most schools won't accept minorities because they'll be like taking a risk. They're not willing to do that. All right? But I don't think you want to put your kids in a school that you feel segregation. You feel like there is some difference between me and you. All right? So, yeah. And also another thing, that if you keep punishing school for these kind of activities, at some point on time, it will start a racial war. It will be like, all right, in this area, so many schools expelling like Indian students, for example, or in that school, that area, so many students being expelled because of Chinese. So it will always be happening. Go ahead.
If the minority, and considering the fact that they are already being discriminated inside or outside of schools, why is it better for them to go out?
Come again?
Considering the fact that minorities are already discriminated inside or outside of schools, why is it better for them to get expelled?
Well, I'm saying that if you're punishing the school, this minority will have privileges, will have more power, will have more freedom than the other students. You being a majority student, you can do whatever. For example, you can destroy something in school and you get expelled, it will be okay. But if you're a minority and you do the same thing and you get expelled, no, it won't work like that because the school will be punished, so it can expel you. As simple as that. And those guys, they mentioned a point about parents are busy and stuff like that. Okay, seeing the morals, to kids can never be taught in school. Kids should be watched by their parents in the first place. So when they come to school, they act upon the stuff that they were taught at home. All right. So busy parents can never be an excuse for punishing schools for happening this kind of stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, member of opposition. Now close the case for side government. Let's the government here.
This because it is undeniable that it's almost impossible for us to curb the problem of discrimination or oppression towards minorities like African Americans in America, right? But the thing is, what's making the problem worse is because the school or the state itself is complicit over the harms that is inflicted towards the minorities themselves, right? Because the problem is in the school that the opposition needs to concede is that the school is biased in of itself in acting towards or like giving punishment towards their students, right? Because there's no debate when you say that the school is solely like punishing students based on what they do and not because of their skin color or where they come from, things like that, right? So let's take a look of the two things that came up from opening opposition, right? The first one on how schools will less likely to take in students when this policy takes place. Now they claim themselves that there are schools that discriminate minorities, right? Because and we also think that there are schools that simply want to get rid of these kinds of students simply because they feel like these kinds of students don't deserve to be there, things like that, right? Because if they can see that there exists schools that don't want to take in students of minorities, then there are also schools that don't want minorities to even be in their schools themselves, right? So the problem is right now is that schools take advantage of the misbehavior of these minorities and punish them to the fullest extent and not well deserved by the students itself, right? And even if it means that they'll get oppressed even more, we believe that it's better off under our case. Why is that so? Because at the very least, the race is not stigmatized even worse of being the bad hats in school, right? Because what happens right now when African Americans are the only ones that always get expelled from school, it actually strengthens the narrative that African Americans are always the bad people, right? And it worsens their future even more, right? Even if it means that under our case they get oppressed even worse, we believe that it's better under our case because in the future, in the long run, we still think that we can better curb the problem of society having a bad mentality towards the African Americans to begin with. And more than that, we believe that the oppression at school by students will never stop to begin with. Under both sides, we have to concede that the oppressions of the majority towards these African Americans will never stop regardless, right? Whether or not the school is punished or not, we still think that the oppression will continue and the cycle will still continue, right? But at the very least, the school will no longer remain complicit over the actions that is taken towards the students to begin with, right? Because we think that right now, what makes it worse is that the school is not being fair enough towards the student, right? Because we think that even white guys or like the majority of students also do the same things as the African Americans students do, right? But the problem is they don't get the same form of punishment as the minorities do, and we don't think. And we think this can never continue. Before I move on to the second rebuttal, yes.
Under our worst case scenario, where you mentioned earlier, when they get kicked out from the listing, then wouldn't it be worse when you pass this motion because then these schools will refuse to take in these students even in the first place, denying them of any chance to even try and get in?
Okay, so they went further to see that schools will expel the minorities even more and don't want to take even more these kinds of students, right? Number one, this means that they can see that schools do not punish based on what they do, but based on other things, right? But more than that, we still think that doesn't make sense because they won't continue throwing them up even more because there are policies like this to stop them from doing so even more, right? Because if it means that their fundings will be cut and teachers will be expelled even more, we don't think that even if how much the school hates these kinds of minorities, they would have to stop, and no, they have no choice other than to stop doing the same thing again, right? And this is the extent that we want to make, even if it means that the society itself cannot accept the narrative that we want to tell you at the end of the day, right? And even if the problem is worse in our case, we still think that the state can always intervene and mitigate, or like give quotas, or like set quotas for schools to take in the minorities, regardless, right? Even if it conceding that the problem, conceding the problem really actually continues to begin with, right? So let's take a look at the second thing that we talked about, on how the development of minority students would be tarnished even more because now they're pressured, right? Opposition side simply promotes the worst future for the minorities because schools like this are undeniably biased, right? We actually give no second chances towards these minorities, because when a majority of because the student of majority does something, we actually give them chances or like give them rehabilitation to be a better person, right? But we don't give them that kind of chance towards the minorities. And why is this harmful, right? Because now you let the narrative that says African Americans are criminals to be strengthened, right? Meaning to say when they go out of school, they don't have education, they have nothing to live based on, Mr. Speaker. And we now they go out of school and have a low quality of life and have no chance of even gaining more respect from the majority. Before I move on, yes. If your issue is with discrimination, then why not set quotas? Then why not actually allow them to go into rehabilitation instead of punishing the whole school for the actions of the field? So the problem is the school itself doesn't want to give these kinds of alternatives towards these minorities, right? Because they're biased and they want to get rid of these minority students to begin with, right? But more than that, right? We also need to understand the situation of these minority students and why they do such things like oppressing, like bullying others and things like that. Because the reason why they act as bad hats is because their social life pressures them and damages them badly. Meaning to say, it is a coerced act to begin with. The oppressive majorities that shapes them to look like the bad guys, and the cycle of minorities being oppressed by the majority students will never stop. But at least the justice is served by the school, right? At the very least, the pressure towards these minorities is lessened because now the school doesn't even oppress them even more. At the very least, only their social life sucks, but not the school that hates them, right? At the end of the day, we still think that that's better off, even if it means that it creates even more racial wars, or like minorities will be even more empowered, right? Because we think that it's fair to begin with. After all these years, where this white supremacy has been extremely supported, right? And these African Americans have been extremely discriminated. We still think that it's time for these African Americans to be supported and to be supported by society. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Whip. Let's hear the last speech for today's debate. I'd like to invite the okay,
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. First thing I'm going to talk about is why we have to do this. What we are talking is about we must to separate them, not for racist thing, but for the good things for both of them. Well, let's say that we have two different cultures with two different minded. This is going to bring a lot of problems for other students who used to be like, let's say, citizen and uncitizen students. This is going to bring a lot of things to their mind. Then they're going to change their behaviors, they're going to change their attitude, so they're going to cause a lot of problems in school. But if we cut this problem from the beginning, there will be no problems again. Well, for me, I've been like mentor in France. Before I get the citizen, I used to study in the grade 9 or grade 10, I think. I used to study with other 5 from my original country, Algeria, studying in France. So how did you think I get treated by students? I get really treated bad from the student because they're racist. Look, this guy's Arabian, talk Arabic, he's not from France, why you should come to our school, why you should stay here? So what the school actually do is separate us, send me to other school. This school is full of like students from my original country. So there I feel safety, I feel good, I feel like I have like friends I have shared with them, like my mind did, I share with them everything. So this is gonna be great for me. But if I stay in that school, how do you think how it could be? It would be something bad, something. Go ahead.
If you want minorities to succeed, why is it better for you to give them freedom compared to it?
I'll explain. Again.
If you want minorities to succeed, why is it better for your side to provide freedom compared to it?
Well, we have to explain them. It's not just we have to go to do the best thing for both of them. We're not just doing this like we don't want to be at school. Like if they have to stay at school, think about it. Like the teacher, how gonna they treat them? They're gonna treat them really bad because they're not from like their society or something. They have different thinking, different minded. This is gonna cause a problem for them. So other point I have to talk is okay. Most of the example that you are talking about is American and African people. What's happening in America? Well, what's happening in America, guys? It's really ended because now we're gonna find there's black school, there's white school. So white and black, did you think there's a problem between them? I don't think so. They really have good education in both school. And when a school do this like punishment, it's not just because she thinks, okay, I'm gonna take away this minority from the school. No, they do this because they think about the good education for the school, the good education for the country, and for other things. I think this is the end because of my friend. I've said all the points, and thank you guys.
Thank you, all of you. With that, the debate is ended. Please come to floor, shake hands, and meet outside